Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wednesday, September 15th, 2021 meeting of the Lake Havasu City Planning and Zoning Commission. If you'd please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Jim Harris.
Here.
Doug Hardy. Donald Bergen.
Here.
Dan McGowan.
Here.
Chad Nelson.
Here.
Susanna Ballard. Here. Matthew Mitchell.
Here.
Sam Levin.
Here.
Gabrielle Medley.
Here.
David Diaz.
Here.
Okay, we have one absence here at the Diaz, so if Ms. Ballard, if you'd come and fill that position, I certainly would appreciate it. And let's go to correspondence and announcements. Mr. Morris.
Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Just to let you know of what's happened recently at the City Council meetings, they approved Ladera South final plat and development agreement. Development agreement got approved last night, and then a final plat for Ladera South, which is in Havasu Foothills, was approved a couple of weeks ago. So that concludes my announcements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections of those minutes by commissioners? Anybody at all? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the minutes as written.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bergen and a second by Mr. McGowan. Is there any further discussion? Okay, let's call for the question.
Mr. Diaz? Okay. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. All right, this is a public hearing, and there is a structured order to this proceeding. The city staff will present each item. There will be time for the commission to ask questions of the staff, and then the applicant will have the opportunity to present their case to the commission. That being done, we will then open the proceeding to the public for their questions and input. I would ask that anyone of the public that wishes to speak limit their trips to the podium and microphone to one only, keep all comments to less than 5 minutes, and to stay on point and not discuss subject matter that is not pertinent to the decision being considered here today. After public testimony is taken, I will then close the public hearing and bring the motion back to the table for city staff's recommendation, discussion amongst the commission, and eventually a motion to approve or disapprove. The first item on today's hearing is ID 21-2954. It is a request for a preliminary subdivision plat for the Havasu Life North, 1780 Bimini Lane, tract 2409, a subdivision tract of, subdivision of tract 115, block 4, lots 6, 7, and 8, creating 31 residential lots to include a private drive and common area on a 3.41 acre parcel in multifamily district. Mr. Morris, your presentation.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, thank you. The subject property includes 3 lots on the south side of Bimini Lane, just east of Bahama Avenue. It consists of tract 115, block 4, lots 6, 7, and 8, and it measures about 3.4 acres. The site generally slopes down about 35 feet from east to west, and a wash abuts the property to the south. A permit is in review right now for rough grading on the property. The zoning map shows the property is zoned multiple family, which is RM zoning. All the zoning around that property is also zoned RM. And then across the wash, there's some property that's zoned R1. The preliminary plat is shown here. The owner plans to subdivide that tract into 31 residential townhome lots with condominium lots with private street and gated access, and then a drainage parcel as part of the project also. The proposed townhome lots range in size from just over 2,000 square feet to just over 4,000 square feet. The building setbacks for the project will be measured from the subdivision's exterior property lines, and then any structures built on each of the townhome lots will require to meet the building and fire codes when constructed. Since there will be no public streets on the property, a development agreement will be required with the final plat submittal outlining the developer's responsibilities for the city's water and sewer infrastructure within the subdivision. The property will have an property owners association to manage and maintain the private streets and improvements. And construction plans will be required prior to vertical construction of any structures on the property. The preliminary plat is currently labeled Havasu Life Bimini. The applicant will use the name Havasu Life North when the final plat is submitted. That concludes staff's presentation. Open any questions from the commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of staff by commissioners? Anybody at all? Okay, hearing none. Is the applicant present? Please come to the microphone, state your name for the record.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Michael Gordon with Desert Land Group, representing ownership on this project. Luke did a pretty good job of going over it. Townhome subdivision, they are going to be built as single-family attached and single-family detached products. So they are individual small single-family homes. Some of them have one common wall, some of them do not. That was the one clarification or additional information I wanted to add. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions of the applicant by commissioners? Mr. Diaz?
Yes, thanks, Travis. Is there a garage, singles, garages, double garages? What are we looking at?
They all have a double garage component to them. Some of them are deeper than others, but it's one door in most cases, but two car wide.
Any other parking besides?
There are a few other parking spaces around the property for guests, but they also all have a 20-foot driveway in front of the garage. So there is room to park in each unit's driveway as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions by the applicant or of the applicant? Nobody? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, this is a public hearing, so I will open the item for consideration to the public. If there is anybody that wishes to speak on this item, either pro or con, please come forward. State your name for the record. Anybody at all? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion and bring it back to the table for staff's recommendations and conclusions.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Based on the findings, the Development Review Committee recommends approval of the Land Use Action ID 21-2954 with the following conditions. If the development is to be gated, fire department access at all entrances, exits will be required. Label the plat as the Havasu Life North, Tract 2409. Show that this is a subdivision of Tract 115, Block 4, Lots 6, 7, and 8. Submit a water report showing the existing system on Bimini Lane can meet the demands of the proposed system. Submit a storm drain report for review. Construction plans will be required for review. And submit a development agreement for review outlining the developer's responsibilities for the city's water and sewer infrastructure within the subdivision. Thank you.
Okay, we are now at the table for discussion, questions of staff, and/or a motion. Commissioners? Anybody? Mr. Nelson?
I would just ask the question again.
Certainly.
If the applicant agrees to everything that the staff is recommending.
The applicant is nodding yes to your question. Any other questions? Okay, we are at the table for a motion. Mr. Nelson.
I'll make a motion to approve ID 21-2954 with staff's recommendations.
And do we have a second? Who was that second? Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Nelson, a second by Ms. Ballard. And any further discussion on the motion? Okay, let's call for the question.
Mr. Bergen? Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, congratulations. Good luck. The second item on today's agenda is ID 212955. It is a request for a preliminary subdivision plat for Cordon Palms, 1550 London Bridge Road, Tract 2410, a subdivision of Tract 2364, Lot 29, creating 21 residential townhome units, 10 garage units, a private drive, and common area on a 5.36 acre parcel in the multiple family residential planned development district. Mr. Morris, your presentation.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. This just over 5 acre triangular shaped property is located southeast corner of London Bridge Road and Palo Verde Boulevard North. Sunset Drive, which provides access to the manufactured home park, lies to the east. The site generally slopes about 15 feet from east to west. The zoning, the property is currently zoned multiple family residential planned development and is currently vacant. There's been some grading on the property. The properties to the north across Palo Verde Boulevard are also zoned multiple family residential and developed with single family residential uses. The property to the east is manufactured home park and is zoned RMH. The property across London Bridge Road to the west is undeveloped BLM property and is zoned agricultural preservation. So the subject property is currently zoned residential multiple family planned development with a specific development plan. And that specific development, approved development plan is shown here. This is what was approved when the zoning was entitled for this property. The approved development plan allows 22 units, private streets with primary access from London Bridge Road and then some additional secondary access from Sunset Lane. The underlying RM zoning allows up to 30-foot building height. The proposed townhome subdivision layout substantially matches the approved development plan, which was approved for the zoning for this property. This is the preliminary plat. It's turned sideways a little bit here, but we have the same orientation as the approved development plan. The preliminary plat this property is the last remaining portion of the overall development for the Saline Hawks. It was previously known as the Lofts at Saline Hawks. The subject property was purchased from the previous developer and is now moving forward under the name Cordon Palms. The owner plans to subdivide the property into 21 residential townhome units, some garage units, a private drive with gated entry, and a common area. The proposed townhome units range in size, lots range in size from 3,800 to over 6,000 square feet. And then 9 of the 10 garage units are about 21 feet wide, one is 18 feet wide, and the rest, the depth of them range from 70 to almost 80 to almost 90 feet in depth. The building setbacks for this project will be measured from the exterior property line of the project, and then any structures built on each townhome lot will be required to meet the appropriate fire and building codes when constructed. Since there will be no public streets on the property, the development agreement will be required with the final plat, outline the developer's responsibilities for the city's water and sewer infrastructure within the subdivision. The property, of course, will have a property owners association to manage and maintain the private streets and improvements. Construction plans will be required prior to vertical construction of any structures. And the preliminary plat is currently labeled the Lofts at Saline Hawks, but the applicant will use the name Cordon Palms when the final plat is submitted. And just as a reminder, the staff did receive a letter dated September 12th from the adjacent property, manufactured home park across to the east, and it provided it to the commission members and the applicant. The preliminary plat, again, this request is for a preliminary plat. The zoning is already in place. The entitlement is in place for this project, and this project meets the approved development plan. That concludes staff's presentation. Open any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Okay, we're at the table for questions of staff. Are there any commissioners that have questions of staff? Mr. Nelson.
Just trying to get back on the right screen. Hang on. Okay, so your recommendation on 3 is relabel parcel C? So, okay. That was really my only question.
Okay, any other questions of staff by commissioners? Hearing none, is the applicant present? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
Good morning again, Chairman, Commissioners. Michael Gordon with Desert Land Group. Luke did a good job, I think, of kind of recapping where we're at and what this is about today. First of all, I do want to just kind of remind us that this is not a zoning action. This project does have a lot of history to it, and I wanted to touch on the history as well. The original developer of this property was part of the Sailing Ox project originally. There were a few changes back in the early 2000s when this first came together, and ultimately it had an approval as a C2 use with a hotel and spa component on it, with I believe 35 or 40 units and a spa component on it. When the economy went down and the developer lost it, this property was picked up and has changed hands a couple times since. In 2014, we helped the then owner of the property go through a plan development amendment to modify that plan that had the hotel and the spa component, downzone it to the residential multifamily plan development that you saw on the screen a minute ago. And we went from that 35 unit hotel with a spa down to 22 townhome units. Those do have a 28-foot, not even 30, a 28-foot height limit in the plan development. Since then, the property has changed hands again, and the new developer is moving forward at this point, again, submitting a preliminary plat for a project that is substantially close to that original development plan. It now has 21 units and then some garage units, which replace kind of reconfigure the site just slightly. The original plan had groupings of townhomes in 3 and 4 buildings wide per building. And these are all now, we're in essence putting some open space between those buildings. They're now all duplex townhome units with one common wall. So instead of larger banks of buildings, you'll see more breaks in the buildings. And again, the plan is following that original plan pretty much very closely to that original approval. We are in receipt of the letter, and I think you'll hear some testimony today from some folks in the adjacent property. Those folks were very vocal during the original zoning case. They've been against development on this property all along. We understand their concerns. We feel like we did a pretty good job of mitigating that originally. And the current owner is excited to move this project forward, and we think we have a project that will fit very well in the neighborhood. But again, this isn't a zoning case today. This use is approved. We're simply here with a preliminary plat, getting ready to move this project forward. We have and will be submitting for a grading plan. There was a grading plan submitted by the original developer back in the early 2000s when that grading took place. It was a permit issued by the city to do that grading. Some of the concerns in the letter were over drainage and floodway and Corps of Engineers stuff. Obviously, everything we do and this owner does in developing this property will follow city and state regulations and development codes. So I don't see any issues with what is being proposed here today. So with that, I'll answer any questions and be happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Are there any questions of the applicant? Mr. Nelson?
I'm aware that this is already approved. I think I was there at the time. Can you, and the entrance is already approved and everything, but can you address the concern about the entrance from London Bridge Road from the residents?
So yes, that entrance has been approved all along, even back when it was proposed to be a commercial spa component. There was an entrance in roughly that location on London Bridge Road. You're talking about 21 townhome units that are more than likely going to be part-time residents. So your amount of traffic, your amount of trips per day coming going for this project are pretty limited. You currently have lot of other driveways and a lot of other uses up and down London Bridge Road. This location on this end has fairly good site visibility. There is a hill obviously off to the south, but as you come up that hill, you see it pretty well from both directions. So engineering doesn't see an issue with the location of that from a traffic standpoint.
Any other questions of the applicant? Ms. Ballard.
Yes, it is. And the gate, you don't see it on this plan. It'll be in, to answer your question, Mr. Nelson, too. There is some stacking room there for at least a vehicle or an RV and a boat or a truck and a trailer type of setup. So there is room to get off the street before you have to wait for the gate to open. And there is a secondary access onto Sunset Drive, but not for the residents. It's emergency only. That is a private drive for the adjacent development, but fire department required that crash gate as a secondary entrance for the fire department emergency vehicles only.
Ms. Ballard, can you turn on your microphone, please?
Another question, are these units going to have garages, or why are there extra garage spaces planned?
So they do, they have garage, so all of the units have garages, a smaller 2-car garage with a driveway component similar to what I described on the previous project. So there is some room in front of the unit. The garages that are there in the center, replacing that structure, replacing some units that were on the original development plan, are just to provide some larger garages for RVs and boats. And those units will be tied to other specific units. And those slivers that are there on the plan look fairly large. The garages will not be that large. There will also be driveway space in front of those garage units. So the actual garage component that's built is smaller than those parcels that are being created, but that's to envelope both the garage unit and the driveway component in front of that. Similar configuration, like I said, with driveways of minimum of 20 feet, providing some space to park in the driveways, as well as a few other additional ancillary spaces for guests.
Another question, what's the height planned for those extra garages?
I'd have to look at the plans. I mean, those will be smaller than the units are a 2-story townhome unit up to 28 feet, which is approved. The garages will not be 28 feet tall. They will be probably in the 16 to 20 foot range.
Any other questions of the applicant?
I have one.
Ms. Medley.
With regard to your civil drawings or your grading, is this going to relieve any of the issues with the stormwater runoff that they've cited in their letter?
So this parcel sits up, where the development's happening, sits up kind of by itself. There is some drainage that drains out of the Sunset Mobile Home Park that comes down to Sunset Drive. Part of the development plan will direct that drainage. That's off-site drainage that we have to deal with. It'll be directed over to the large drainage parcel. So parcel B, that's on the north side of the property, is a large dedicated drainage easement and drainage parcel. It's always been there. It parallels Palo Verde Boulevard. There is a wash that comes down Palo Verde from that part of Lake Havasu City that drains across Sunset Drive and drains through that parcel. This property sits up, is not affected by that. The drainage coming off of this parcel will go through stormwater, water quality ponds and meet all stormwater requirements of Lake Havasu City. And then the outflow for that will go into the drainage in parcel B and go across London Bridge Road like it does today. Like I said, there is some off-site drainage that we're dealing with coming out of the Sunset Mobile Home Park that will be directed along property line, along that private drive, and down into that drainage as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Yeah, just David.
Mr. Diaz.
Yeah, just to get it on the record. So this is not a rezoning request, as I think is mentioned in the letter. It's already zoned for what you were referring to. And anything that goes on moving forward, and staff, you could probably answer this, will obviously meet all the codes and the building codes and the egresses and our drainage issues. It will be addressed and have to be up to those standards.
Yes, to expand on your question a little bit, this is the preliminary plat, and so this is, as the title implies, it's preliminary. The next step is a final plat, and that's where they really spend the money to do the engineer drawings, and it gets more fully reviewed at the final plat process with those improvement plans. So a lot of the concerns that are addressed in the letter we received, a lot of those will be addressed at the final plat process.
And to expand on that, the part of the final plat process, drainage reports, sewer and water reports, detail the final grading plans, the improvement drawing permits, all of that as part of the final plat process gets submitted to staff, has to follow code, gets reviewed by staff.
I just wanted to get that on the record. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I know that's the case. So thank you.
Yes.
Let me go one step further. Because this is already zoned a planned development, it is just today we are just looking at the preliminary subdivision plat for approval on that. Okay, any other questions of the applicant? All right, thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing, and I would invite anybody that wishes to speak on this item, either pro or con, to come to the microphone and state your name for the record.
Good morning.
Pull the microphone down to your mouth, please.
Good morning. My name is Ed Cabana, and I'm with Sunset Park since
Thank you.
2005, so I've seen a lot of this stuff going on. And about 2006, they put 500 loads of dirt there from Sailing Hawk's first development. And that dirt was leveled out and left there. And it was supposed to have been temporary left there for future items, not that one. But they raised the level of that whole lot, which used to, the water would run down our street right across that lot and into the desert across London Bridge Road. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. It can't. The water builds up in front of that lot because it's so high. It's at least 5 foot higher than it was intended to be. And we've never seen that straightened out. We're worried about drainage, and there should be basins on each end, but how can you get a basin on each end if there's a wash already there? And the water isn't draining anywhere. And on the south end of the lot, the pointy end, there's no room for a drainage area back there. It ends in the point, and there's a driveway there and another wash immediately right there. So those are just some of the things we're worried about. And the other one is the traffic on London Bridge Road because of the hill coming down. Got one little entrance, you got a sidewalk there. It would have to be removed to have some sort of a ramp into that property. If that was there, it would be a lot easier for everybody because it wouldn't slow the traffic down on London Bridge Road. And occasionally that road gets really tied up. So we'd like to see that, something done with that, like a turn off into the property, which would be safer for everybody. And we receive a lot of fire trucks in our neighborhood. We're the only 55 and above park in the whole, all of Lake Havasu. And our road is the one they want to put a fire truck entrance to that road, which is fine. They have one at another property up the hill, and that works out. It's kept locked. The fire department has a key and all that. But that Sunset Street is a busy street with fire trucks all year round because of our 55 status. We have lots of people there, and there's just a few of them here. So we'll look for the future and see what happens down the street and all the approvals by you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabana. Anybody else wishes to speak on this item? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
Hi, my name's Stuart Warren, I'm from Sunset Park. And as you can see, just in the 3 days that we've heard about this plan and this commission meeting, we raised a fair amount of attention because this development is going to adversely affect the property values of all these retired citizens of Lake Havasu. And I would certainly ask you all to consider the fact that this is going to be detrimental to not only the park, Sunset Park, but also to that whole visual in that region. And there is a wildlife reserve across the street that people are aware of. There is a very busy traffic problem on on London Bridge Road, and there is a significant hill to the south that is adversely affected by an entry off of London Bridge. And I would just like to have you think about the adverse effects of property values. And because mainly right now we all have pretty reasonable views of the lake, which is one of the reasons we all decided to come here and retire. So I just ask you to really consider that, consider the impact, and the height of these structures is still in question. There's still a lot of questions that we need to know before we even know how to oppose it. So thank you very much for your time.
May I ask you a question,
Yes.
please, or a couple of questions?
Yes.
In your opinion, how is this going to adversely affect your property?
Well, it's going to wipe out the view of the lake.
View is not a consideration.
Okay, well, it's also going to bring a lot more traffic to that particular place.
Is the entrance to your subdivision off of London Bridge Road, Sunset
No,
Drive?
no, it's off of Palo Verde North.
Okay. But there is an entrance to your subdivision off of Sunset.
Yes, there's 3 mobile homes that.
Well, no, yeah, that's true. No, there's 3 mobile homes in the park. I'm sorry, I
And our
misspoke.
RV parking and boat parking is right off of there too.
That's true.
We park our RVs and our boats is right off of.
So nobody, I'm just trying for my own edification.
Sure.
Nobody uses Sunset Drive to access their properties.
Oh, yeah.
Off of London Bridge Road.
Yes, people do use Sunset for access.
Okay, that's the point
They
I'm
do.
trying to make.
Yes,
Is there
they
is
do.
an entrance right there already to your subdivision that has, say, maybe 70 units or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
What's that?
Are there any other questions of the
And then
applicant?
there's,
When you get it to the microphone, you can do that.
okay, okay.
Is there any other questions of the applicant?
I just want to make one comment.
Mr. Diaz.
Kind of going to what you were saying. So it is already zoned for this, and I was kind of getting to what you're saying about the property values, but something is going to be built there. It is property that can be built on, and I'm in the same boat you are in some instances where our house is at. But if someone owns a lot and it meets all the codes, they have the right to build. And I mean, we live in America, Yeah. So I just wanted to make that point also for the record.
Okay.
Any other questions of Mr. Orn? Okay, thank you, Mr. Orn.
Thank you.
Anybody else who would like to speak? Please come to the microphone, state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Butler Villa. Do you want me to spell that?
Please.
It's R as in Roger, R-O-N-D-A. Butler, that's B-U-T-L-E-R, hyphen V as in Victor, I-L-L-A. So to clarify, the drive for our park that comes in off of London Bridge is only access to the RV and storage area and about 3 of the homes. that road is chained off and is no longer used as access for the other 70 homes that are in that part of the development. For those homes, everyone accesses off of Palo Verde North.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. And I would also like to clarify, we're not opposed to any development of that. It's reasonable development. And as a retired facilities director, I know when things are left a little loose in the planning, it's a lot more expensive to make changes later. We're just looking to see what's planned and make sure that things are being considered as we go along, so we're not dealing with it after the fact.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions of the speaker? All right, thank you, Ms. Butler-Villa. Anybody else that wishes to speak on this item, please come forward, state your name for the record.
My name is Jill Cruz, and I'm a resident of Sunset Park. I am one of the houses is right on Sunset Drive as you come into the park and face the property. And while I truly understand and support some being built there, my concern is, again, the buildup of the dirt. Because every time it rains, and it's not just from runoff from our streets, as it comes down the wash to the right of the property, down Palo Verde and crosses Palo Verde and comes down, it doesn't all go into the wash. It diverts down Sunset Drive and floods the street right in front of my house. And if there were large walls there, again, blocking that flow, and they don't incorporate these ponds that have been suggested in previous plans, we will have our house flooded out. And so will everybody else that lives on that front row between the two washes. So I just would like, again, when they submit the next plans for the next section of building, that bringing the level of that lot down and adding the ponds so it prevents the flooding and getting in there. And I would also love the committee here to come down to the property, walk the property, see where the washes are, so you can totally comprehend what we look at every day, and the traffic on London Bridge Road. I think they need to address more the entrance there and a longer link setting back into the project, as they have done in many other storage and housing developments along London Bridge Road, because when that hill right there, let me just tell you, from like 3 to 7 o'clock at night, there is nonstop traffic with boats, with trailers, RVs, razors, and people getting off the lake, and they come right up Palo Verde and go right up into town. There is a ton of traffic there, and it will impede traffic if we don't have a longer stretch in that accommodates at least 2 trucks with boats, especially the big boats. They'll be sitting out there on London Road barking right where they come over the hill. And people come over there fast, even though the speed limit is 35. You come out there with the speed gun on any day and you'll see them going 45 to 55 miles an hour hauling boats and vehicles and RVs, because they're all going down to the campgrounds as well on Friday. So I would just invite you to come see it, so that when further plans are brought into this committee, who I can see from this morning in your own notes have taken it seriously and are looking at everything, that you would just come down and visit and see for yourself, so you could totally visualize it, not just here, but in 3D dimensions and the washes and the traffic. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you very much, Ms. Cruz. Anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
My name is John Coleman, Sunset Park. I'd just like to remind you, if you haven't had a walk on the property in question, please do. The washes are significant. And if there isn't enough room to allow for the washes to do what they do, especially here, there's going to be a big issue and a big problem. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of the speaker? Anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? I'll call you up in a second. Anybody else?
I'm Tom Graves from Sunset Park also, and I would like to know if there's ever been an environmental impact statement on this property for this development. Every development I've ever been involved with, you have to have an environmental impact statement. Especially with this, we have washes on both ends, and on the south end, their driveway proposal is right in the wash. How can you get away with that? You can't do that. So I would like to know from the Corps of Army Engineers and everybody else with an impact statement, how are they getting away with this? We've never seen a drainage plan. We've never seen anything. And you approve these projects? It's not right.
We haven't approved the project yet.
You've already granted.
We are here to approve
granted what it can be.
A preliminary plat.
You say there's 5 acres. Well, if you got 2 acres of usable property, you'll be lucky. In that road too, where you come over the hill, and where their driveway is going to be, how come there's no egress or regress? You're going to come over that hill, and like they said, there's going to be boat trailers and trucks parked there, and they come over that hill 50 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. You see it every day. It's not safe. And how come you don't have a turn lane coming the other way going into the project? We have a turn lane on Sunset, on North Palo Verde on Sunset coming into our place. And it's not even a tenth as busy as London Bridge Road. So you need more impact on this stuff.
Jim,
Mr. Nelson,
I can probably help guide you. Earlier when Luke talked about this preliminary plat, it's basically just a drawing, and all the things that you guys are discussing, the traffic, the drive lanes, the impact studies, environmental, topographical surveys, they're not there yet. So this, like you said, this right now, they're trying to go for, 21 lots and these garages. But if the environmental impacts and surveys come back to where they have to do more stormwater retention and stuff like that, they might not end up with 21. But what we're here to do is decide whether we approve this preliminary plat.
Right. Well, how do you approve 21 lots or buildings and you don't even have an impact statement? You don't have anything. You don't have drawings.
We don't need
you
to.
have nothing.
We don't need to.
This gives them a place to start.
Yeah.
And then the next hearing will cover all of the information that you're requesting.
Yeah, all those studies will be done, and if like you said, if the stormwater, all the concerns that you guys have, the traffic and the stormwater and all that stuff, if there needs to be more retention ponds placed on this land, and Luke, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they will have to do topographical surveys to show the elevation in 3D, like Ms. Cruz said. They'll have to do stormwater plans. They'll have to do traffic plans, environmental impact studies, compaction tests, make sure that all that dirt's compacted and ready to build on. And all of those will have to go through engineers and approvals that are beyond our level of expertise. So you can be assured that those processes will happen. All we're doing is approving whether these meet the zoning and the setbacks, and that's all we're doing today.
Yeah, well, they've approved that dirt being there already from what we understand. Well, they raised that property 5 feet, and now they're going to build 30-foot buildings. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
They'll have to go through compaction tests, and they'll have to test the soil before they can build on it.
Yeah.
I would submit that they probably already had a grading permit to do that, and there are specific requirements for that grading permit. That property can't be developed if it does lend itself to your subdivision draining across the property.
Yeah.
So they've gone ahead and filled that property, and all of this stuff will be checked in the next segment of this process.
Yeah, well, let's hope it doesn't railroad just like it did last time. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this item?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, from staff
Mr. Morris.
perspective, just to make it clear, the city staff has received a preliminary plat application with some supporting documentation, and it's been reviewed by city staff, engineering department. So there are some general plans. Generally, the plans are in place. So this preliminary plat, those preliminary plans have been reviewed and preliminary approved. So when you say we don't have any plans, we do have some plans in place. Enough plans to do this preliminary plat. The next step is the final plat where they fine tune those plans, and that's where we see more detailed level at the engineering. So I don't want you to think there are no plans in place at all. There are plans have been submitted. They've been reviewed at the preliminary plat level, and the final plat will include more finely detailed plans at that stage. So just make that clear. Thank you.
I'll ask one last time, is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak on this item? I'm sorry? Well, I asked you to limit your trips to one, but I will allow it. Make it brief, please. State your name for the record again.
Stuart Warren. I would like to concur with Jill's recommendation that the entire commission come down and actually look at the property so that it's understandable what our concerns are. So that's my biggest concern, is that it needs to have eyes on the situation to really, it's a unique piece of property. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Okay, one last time. Anybody that wishes to speak on this item? Anybody at all? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion of the meeting, and I'm going to ask the applicant to come back and address some of these concerns.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to.
State your name for the record again, please.
Michael Gordon.
Thank you.
I think a little history here will maybe help answer some of the questions. I understand the concerns over drainage. We're concerned about it too. If you go back in the history of this project, when Sailing Hawks was developed and put together originally, Palo Verde Boulevard did not connect down to London Bridge Road. It dumped onto Sunset Drive, and all of that traffic and all of those issues then went down Sunset Drive and connected to London Bridge Road. So when Sailing Hawks was first put together and parceled out, it allowed for that owner at the time worked with the city to allow for a right-of-way to be put in place and dedicated to the city to allow Palo Verde Boulevard to connect to London Bridge Road. That took an immense amount of traffic and issues off of Sunset Drive. And during that process, Sunset Drive was actually dedicated to the mobile home park and is owned by them now. In that process, and even back when Sunset Mobile Home Park was developed, it was developed incorrectly. I mean, it should never have been allowed to have all of that drainage that exists just sheet flow across someone else's private property. Correct. Take this whole equation out of the question. You can't just develop something and let your drainage dump onto somebody else's private property.
Correct.
That was a long time ago. It happened. That condition exists today, and we know about that. So we now, as we develop this property, are forced to deal with that drainage. We shouldn't have to, but we do, because if we don't, yes, we certainly can't dam up and flood your property. And if we don't deal with it, it will continue to try and flood onto the new development's property. So a couple of things that are in place, the 2+ acres of drainage easement, that whole green belt you see along Palo Verde Boulevard is there to facilitate drainage, is there to help mitigate this issue. There is a small parcel on the plat in the very bottom corner that was alluded to, where that wash crosses across. That will still remain. The drive is on the other side. The entrance drive is on the other side of that wash mitigation issue. And so what we're then dealt with is the drainage coming off of the streets of the mobile home park that hits Sunset Drive needs to go somewhere. In the development plans, we are dealing with it along property line and on the private drive behind there. Yes, there's a wall going in, but it's allowing drainage to come through, and that drainage then is directed both directions to the drainage that exists on the north and to the drainage that exists on the south. So we're very aware of the drainage issues because it is a major impact to this property. And we have no choice but to deal with it, and that will be our financial burden to bear. So I think when the development plans happen and when the grading is finished and the development is complete, the drainage will be mitigated. You will not see impacts to the Sunset Home Mobile Home Park. It can't happen. The city won't allow that to happen, and we can't allow that to happen, or we have, liabilities there. So a lot of history there that I think is important to understand what's going on. The dirt that was placed, that yes, in effect today is blocking that, was placed under a permit, a grading permit issued by Lake Havasu City, okay? The drainage that they refer to that is an issue, or that blocking that's happening there today, is because dirt was placed, grading was done under a permit, but the development was never finished. So it leaves it in an unfinished state where you do have grading issues, you do have drainage issues. The development plans, when this project's built, will mitigate those issues and deal with those issues long-term. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions regarding that. In terms of the driveway access, yeah, it's not ideal, but if you look, it's actually better than everything else that exists on that hill. Kirk Drive is a major drive that drops down onto London Bridge Road. That sits right on the crest of the hill. So talk about a traffic issue. That's the major traffic dumping in and out is on Kirk Drive. You also have Quail Ridge. You have the other little subdivision that's there. You have the access into a portion of Sunset Mobile Home Park. So there's a lot of other traffic coming and going on London Bridge Road that actually is closer or on top of the hill where you have less sight visibility. This location is further down the hill where you have at least reasonable sight distance in both directions. And the gate will be in, like I mentioned earlier, far enough to mitigate the minimal traffic that I think you'll see coming and going from this project. The question about the sidewalks that are there, yeah, obviously city's gonna require when we put a driveway in that the sidewalks tie together, the handicap and ADA accessibility ramps are put in. We're gonna have to landscape that whole strip along that sidewalk. So that whole public sidewalk area will actually improve and get enhanced as part of this development. Obviously, it was stated before, this property is entitled. It's entitled for up to 28 feet. View is not a right, but we feel like we're doing a good job building a quality project that will fit within the overall neighborhood area and have minimal impacts on everybody. So hopefully that helped satisfy a few of the concerns, answer a few questions. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you guys may have.
Any other questions of the applicant by commissioners?
I do.
Mr. Nelson.
Michael, if you could just explain to them what type of impact studies you've already gone through and what you're going to have to go through throughout the project.
Well, an environmental impact statement or study is not something that Lake Havasu City requires anywhere on any of their projects. Drainage master plans, drainage studies, sewer studies, sewer reports, obviously detailed grading plans, improvement drawings, all of that is required as part of their standard process. As Mr. Morris alluded to, the preliminary plat process does require preliminary plans to all of those things. So preliminary grading and drainage plans, preliminary sewer and water reports, grading plans, layouts, stuff that gives staff enough information to look at it and decide whether they can support this preliminary plat that's presented. That work has been done. We're already into the final construction drawings, the improvement drawings, the final stormwater reports, coordinating with the city, FEMA, the Corps on that drainway. That's a major drainway right there. And it's staying there. It's not being impacted. That will stay there forever. There's an easement in place.
Not now, not now.
That wash drains that whole part of town right there. And there is an easement the city has for drainage over that property. So when we talk about the size of this parcel, it's over 5 acres. It was alluded to, yeah, there's about 3.5 acres of this 5.5 acre piece is actually developable because of the dedications that we have to make to preserve that 2 acres of drainage and the small drainage piece on the other corner. So that will be there forever. It will be enhanced with landscaping. I believe a lot of you use that and this property right now for walking your dogs and going for walks and things like that. That will still be there. The drainage will still go through there like it does today. The drainage off of the existing mobile home park will be directed there, which is where it's supposed to go. Right now it's directed right onto the private property, onto the usable portion of the private property. That will be captured and directed in both directions to the existing drainage that will stay in place.
And what about soils testing and compaction tests?
Yeah, when we go through and do the final grading, there will be compaction. We've already done a new geotechnical report for the property. There was fill that was placed there in the past. That will be processed, recompacted, and the final grades will be set. There will be third-party geotechnical tests done on all of the grading. The grading will be done per city standards and beyond, obviously, for ensuring that the homes that are constructed are on a good, solid foundation.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you.
All right, ma'am, if you have something, you have to come to the microphone and state your name.
Hi, I'm Pam Stanforth, and obviously I live in Sunset Park, been there for 10 years. I actually live pretty close to the area that is the drainage area. And because we do live there and we're there every day, that area has become a sanctuary for a lot of wildlife, a lot. We've seen a lot of wildlife in the park because you have a nature preserve across the street. That watered area has become a natural habitat for a lot of things. My question is what are the plans for that development? Are they going to hose that all out? Are they going to, he said landscaping, but there's a big difference in a saguaro with paving stones and a natural habitat that's there. Not only at the edge of Sunset Park, but as it goes up toward, we've seen multiple wildlife there. And we're lucky in that respect that we're closer to the lake, it's more private. A lot of places in town don't have that. You might see an occasional coyote, not there. We just had burros there yesterday. So in that particular area right there. So my question is to him is what is the plan for the development of that wash area?
I will call him back up and answer that, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, thank you. Because of the significance of that wash, what you in essence see in green, the vegetation that's there, the nice trees that are there, the drainage that's there is staying in that condition. We're not impacting that.
There was landscaping. So
we will be landscaping all along London Bridge Road, along that existing sidewalk that's there. No, the intent, where the property, so you see the drainage easement that's there, and you see the proposed rear property lines for those parcels. There will be wall fence components there on the back of those properties, but that which is in essence right about where you see the dirt and the trees start on that aerial photo right now. What you're seeing from a platted standpoint here is basically a footprint over the top of what's already been disturbed out there. That 120-foot drainage easement will stay as is. The trees that are there, the vegetation that's there, the existing washes and the way the water flows will stay as is. So the natural wildlife that's using that area, we're not impacting that vegetation as part of this development. The impacted area that you see out there today, that's what's being ultimately developed finally to a finished condition.
well, that wash is substantial.
Yeah, we can't.
A lot of washes here in town.
No, I fully understand.
Habitat for a long time.
Yeah, that's why it's staying the way it is. If we were to go touch that, the cost of manipulating that and mitigating it would be substantial. There's no reason to do that. We can't. It's a 120-foot drainage easement that's dedicated to the city. They wouldn't let us go in there and do that if we wanted to.
You'd be disturbing a lot.
I'm so sorry. You can't have a conversation. One, we can't pick you up on the recording, and you need to address the commission, please.
No problem.
I think I'd
be happy to visit with them about that offline at any point. But the point of that is a 120-foot drainage easement that's already dedicated to the city. It's already recorded. It's not that is not something new, and we don't have the right without city's blessing to go in and do anything, and we're not intending to do anything in that area.
In addition to that, it's a Corps of Engineers jurisdiction, and there'd be no need to go in there and disturb it.
Correct. And the Corps of Engineers word has been thrown out a lot, and it's in that letter. That is an area we would have to coordinate with the Corps of Engineers, and we don't intend to do that because we're not going to touch it. We're not going to impact it.
Too costly.
there's no reason to.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Yes, thank you.
Make a quick comment.
Yeah.
Mr. Diaz.
So this is a great example of, I think, having these open meetings like this, why they should be like this, and where there's legitimate concerns by residents in an area, and they're answered, and they're talked about, and they're brought up, and then they're addressed correctly by the developer or staff or committee members and so forth. So I think it's a good idea to have, when we do this, that your concerns are heard, but then, like, for instance, exactly this wash, I think the rumor out there was the wash was going to be wiped out and the habitat was going to be wiped out, and it's not. So I hope that it appeases and helps alleviate some of the concerns that it's going to be an open process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Gordon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have you been to the microphone before?
Once, it's a question for him.
You have come to the microphone and state your name.
John Coleman, Sunset Park. And my question is, the fill dirt that was placed there years ago literally is 5 foot higher than the original land. So my question is, the plan to remove the 5 foot of fill or try to compact it so where the 28 foot height rule, it now makes it a 33 foot height rule for the housing, condominiums, whatever they may be. And everyone keeps saying there's one wash. No, there's not. There's two significant washes. The one on Palo Verde North is larger in size. However, when the monsoon hits, we all know what happens. So please bear in mind, there's not one, there's two. And is the height going to be 33 feet, or is it going to be 28 feet for a structure that's going to block more of the view that the current residents might have? Thank you.
Mr. Gordon.
Yeah, thank you. We're certainly aware there are two drainage areas. The big one that we've talked about, the small triangle in the bottom left corner, is the other wash. As I mentioned, the entrance is to the north of that existing drainage and wash that is there. So we're certainly aware and dealing with both of those. In terms of the height and the grade issue, staff can point out how the height is measured on a property like this. It's actually, in this case, measured from a point at the intersection of Sunset and Palo Verde. If you look back at what was approved before as a maximum pad elevation, and we're staying with that or even lower in most cases, it's based off of that elevation, and that's what we're building the project to. The fill that's there, I'd have to look closely at the grading plan. It's kind of all over the place right now in terms of what the finished grade is versus what's there today. I couldn't accurately tell you because it's built at like 3 different levels right now. So I couldn't tell you off the top of my head exactly which one is going to be finished grade. But in essence, most of that gets regraded, not up any higher, if anything, kind of the middle grade of what's there, I would say. And then yes, some of the buildings will be up to 28 feet tall.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, I am going to close the public hearing once again. And now we're going to bring it back to the table for staff's recommendations. Before I do that, though, thank you all for your comments.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Based on the findings, the Development Review Committee recommends approval of Land Use Action ID 2955 with the following conditions. If the development is to be gated, fire department access must be provided. Correct the subdivision name to Cordon Palms Tract 2410 throughout the plat. Relabel Parcel C at the southern tip of the property to Parcel F and include its proposed use and ownership in the dedication statement. Submit a final storm drain report for review. Construction plans will be required for review. Submit a development agreement for review outlining the developer's responsibilities for the city's water and sewer infrastructure within the subdivision. Thank you.
Okay, we are now at the table for discussion and or a motion, commissioners. Anybody? Mr. Diaz, I see you reaching. No?
I was just looking at something. I'm not reaching.
Anybody? Discussion and or a motion? Mr. Nelson.
I'll make a motion to approve Land Action ID 21-2955 with staff's recommendations.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Nelson, a second by Mr. Diaz to approve ID 21-2955 with staff's recommendations. And those recommendations were read just prior to our discussion. Any further discussion on this motion?
Yes.
Mr. Bergen.
Okay. It's obvious there is a negative impact on the adjoining residential properties. And that's a possible denial. However, we've got 5.5 acres surrounded by hundreds of residential houses. And this 5.5 acres needs to be developed in some way. And I think we need to, at this time, move on to the next segment, the final plans. And I urge the neighbors to be involved in that. That the concerns need to be really looked at in these final plans. And at that point, I will have to, at this time, go with the motion.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Nelson.
I appreciate your comments. I know sometimes, people think that we don't look at these properties or walk them, but we do. I've been on this property several times, and it's one of the things that I don't think that Michael emphasized enough is how they're getting the short end of the stick, having to deal with everything that has come down the hill to be able to develop this property. And rest assured, they will have to go through a lot of scrutinizing stormwater plans for this development. And, and through the past, even 5 years ago, you didn't have to do a lot of this stormwater stuff. And if the property was developed 5-10 years ago, those problems would exist. And, there's a lot of things that we can't do, when it's great to see the neighborhood come and fight for their neighborhood and fight for the things that they have value for. And I'm confident that it's going to come together nicely for everybody, and that all the things that they've addressed and they've concerned about are very thorough, and they're going to be addressed. There's nothing we can do about the height restriction. Those things have come and gone. But I don't think it's going to affect your view for sure, but your property values, it's probably not going to affect. We've had this conversation in planning and zoning many times, and we do take those things into consideration. But I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised at what it does actually do for the property values. But there's a lot of things that we can't address because it's already been approved. But I do like seeing everybody coming out and working together and making something like this, addressing everybody's concerns and talking about it, I think is really important. So.
Anybody else? Okay, no further discussion. Let's call for the question.
Motion passes 7-0.
Congratulations and good luck. The next portion of this meeting is the call to the public. This is where anybody can come to the microphone and speak to the commission. We may not respond, but anybody can come and address the commission if they would like to. Please come forward, state your name for the record, please.
Anybody wants to come down and tour the property?
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Okay, future meetings, Mr. Morris.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. The next regular meeting scheduled for October 6th, and we do have items for that meeting.
And I would like to let you know at this time, I will be absent for that meeting.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, Commissioners, thank you. We stand adjourned.